Thank you everyone for joining us here at our Friday feature video. This month we have Carol and Stan Greer who are joining us in our conversation around NFP. Just want to thank you also for joining us in the other sessions that we've had here on YouTube, and thanking you for subscribing and liking and sharing our videos. They're very much a part of our apostolate here at Divine Mercy Care, is to really inspire and educate, and this is just one of those ways we do that. This month, NFP. And Carol and Stan are not only just practitioners of the NFP methodologies, but you've been instructing for nearly 20 years. Mm-hmm. And you're local to the area here. But so tell us a little bit more about your story, how you first started kind of hearing about NFP, and then we'll kind of maybe jump into what inspired you to kind of jump in and really start to instruct.
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I guess so. Well, Carol and I met in 1988, and I fell for her right away. But I was brought up in the Episcopal Church. I was actually baptized Catholic because my father was Catholic, but he was non-practicing, and my mom had been a Baptist. And at first, she took us to Catholic church, but my father wasn't going, and so ultimately she decided to become Episcopalian. So I hadn't really heard anything about artificial contraception or why the Catholic Church opposes artificial contraception, except for stupid jokes. But I fell in love with Carol, and she was Catholic, and we wanted to get married she wanted to get married in the Catholic Church, and I was amenable to that. Mm-hmm. And so we were in pre-Cana in the Arlington Diocese, where we still live today, and we were strongly encouraged by the priest who was doing our pre-Cana to take an NFP class. Mm-hmm. So that's how we learned about it.
That's how we got started.
Mm-hmm.
My mom had done sort of a modified version of the Billings method. Okay. So she did mucus observation, and she did her own temperature charting, and she kind of came up with a symptothermal method, which is what we instruct. Mm-hmm. And so I knew about it in a very basic sort of way from her. But as far as being actually encouraged to take it, it seemed very 1950s when we heard about it, that a priest would suggest that we do it. But it's just as Stan said. Father Rustkamp suggested that we take it, and so we did.
Yeah. And, I know this doesn't resonate with everybody, but even though I didn't know anything about NFP, it made sense morally to me right off the bat, because I agreed with what practically everybody says, and I think they really believe it, that babies are a blessing. And I understood, being an adult of at least minimal intelligence, that what marital relations lead to babies. Mm-hmm. So if marital relations lead to babies, and babies are a blessing, then why should you deliberately take an act that leads to babies and make it sterile?
Yeah.
That made sense to me.
Yeah.
I was more scared, but.
Yeah.
But as but on the other hand, at that time, Carol was already on the pill. She'd been put on the pill by a doctor for, not for contraceptive reasons.
Yeah. Early stage endometriosis.
Yeah. So that was an obstacle during our engaged period and at the very beginning of our marriage.
Yeah.
So we were, committed increasingly to practicing NFP, but at the very beginning of our marriage, we really didn't, because Carol was still on the pill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But we had learned in our class, and this was something I didn't know at all before taking the class, but it was of great concern to me, that when you're using hormonal contraceptives like the pill, there can be, nobody knows exactly how often, breakthrough ovulations where a pregnancy does begin. Mm-hmm. And there is a baby, but then the pregnancy ends very early, and we didn't want to do that. Yeah. So we tried, not probably in a very good way or successful way, to abstain during the period when we thought there might be breakthrough ovulations.
As it turns out, with the new dosage of the pills, you can't predict when the ovulation would occur. Okay. So there's no way to game the system.
But ultimately, we recognized
within a couple months,
within 6 months, within a few months, that we couldn't go on doing that. So we took the plunge. Carol went off the pill, and very shortly after that, we started our first baby.
Very clear.
But it was remarkable when we did. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but that my cycles were so screwed up, and I had no idea until I started practicing NFP. And I was thinking that I was having these long 35-day cycles, when in fact I was having 70-day cycles with a breakthrough bleed in the middle. I started trying some resources available that were suggested through the Couple to Couple League and through any sort of natural resource. And I was able to, especially with the help of some pretty, targeted vitamin fit therapy, nutritional therapy, to lower my cycles down to being about 40 days within just a couple months. And when we did become pregnant, I took my charts to our OBGYN, and he looked at them and he said, without NFP, it would have been like,
difficult diagnosis.
Very difficult to have conceived, because we knew when we were actually fertile, and that made all the difference. And then, of course, after you have a child, your system tends to change, and I've never had the same sort of problems since that I had before I was pregnant with Max.
I was just going to say, there's so many benefits that we all, those who are familiar with NFP, know that come along with it. You outlined one where. But what has it done for you as a couple, as your marriage? How do you think NFP has really affected your marital state?
Well, one big advantage I think that NFP couples have, and that includes us, is especially compared to couples that are using hormonal contraceptives, is that you have a strong incentive. You're really encouraged, pushed to talk about when you're going to have a child. Yeah. And how many children you're going to have. If you get on hormonal contraceptives, then it becomes easy, all too easy, to not talk about it. And you think maybe you had a discussion about it years ago, and we know couples, it can be very
really sad,
where they really haven't communicated about it for years, and suddenly they're reaching the end of their fertile years, or maybe they already have, and they never really had an agreement about that, and they never really had a good discussion about it. Right. And that's one of the reasons, a number of reasons why we think artificial contraceptives have a bad impact on marriage. And even if you're using something less, drastic than hormonal contraceptives, it still makes it easy. Yeah, more easily reversible. It's still, you can get into a default where why think about it?
Right.
I think it also gives us, as a married couple, it's easy to sort of have the relationship where it would be easy to slip into a roommate relationship where everybody has their responsibilities and then you get together for sex.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
And whereas with NFP, you're challenged to think about your marriage and your family on the whole. It's a more purposeful expression, and in a more purposeful way of interacting with your spouse. So sex is always put in its proper place, within your marriage, because it has to be, because you never are able to and you also don't get a chance to take it for granted.
Right.
It's not that jar of Nutella that you keep in the pantry and that you can always take it out. It's like the once a year pumpkin spice lattes. You're going to get them when you're able to get them.
No, I agree. I think you're hitting a really great point, and that is, I think both of you are. I think for me, when I hear it, I think it's part of the conversation where the male really should and does get involved in that conversation. And it's a strategic conversation to say, okay, we need to talk about this. Are we ready to have another child if it's our number third or our second? And we all know that in any good marital relationship, there's good communication. So we're all trying to strive for that. But this idea that things evolve throughout a marriage. The way we're thinking and interacting that first couple of years of marriage, and the way you're acting right now, 20 plus years into your marriage, it's totally different.
Yeah.
You're thinking, but the idea is that you're setting that groundwork, that you're having that conversation regularly. That it's beyond there's stressful things that come into the marriage, and we've got to make sure that we're having those conversations.
And conversely, we do get the occasional couples that don't contracept and are very afraid of contracepting, and so they don't want to learn any method of family planning at all. They're afraid that they'll take from God what is his prerogative. For that, I mean, if that is how you want to marry, of course, that's fine. That's fine. But for a lot of women as well, they don't realize how tired they're going to be. And if nothing else, NFP gives you the opportunity to say, again, which is saying, you know, we're going to sacrifice this very good thing, which is the unitive act between us, for, at this moment, the better thing of saying we're going to wait another 2 months before we try to have another baby, and give the baby a chance to get over this colic, or give the little baby a chance to actually stop falling over all the time, so that you'll be able to take care of it. So it's like, also for me, it gave me a sense of control and a sense of when you have to periodically abstain, your husband has an objective reason to learn self-control. Forgive me for saying that, but
it's true.
But it gives you the subjective reason, so that when it's a subjective reason, it's a lot easier to communicate. So it's a lot easier to say to him, I am really tired. This is not going to work this evening. And he's already learned, and you've learned, that there's a season for this.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. I think you're hitting a really great point, because I think that's the other part of this is, yes, the man, in most relationships, the man is the initiator in the process, and I think for him to also, again, not only in the conversation, but through understanding symbols and signs and body language and all that is very important. I think it's the old idea of mastering the will, for sure, and what is love in the end, right? And we've said this in other videos. Love is sacrifice. It's okay. I will sacrifice my urges and my desires this evening or the next couple of days, because I know it's going to be what's best for my wife right now, because I know she needs a break or whatever the case might be. And I think that's an important aspect. And I think it also provides the opportunity for him, the male, the husband, to step up and be that great source of support.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know. So tell me this, though. So you've implemented, you're practicing it as a couple, but it's now almost 20 years of actually instructing it. So when and what was the inspiration for you guys to really become instructors?
Well, the big thing was that, as I mentioned, I wasn't a practicing Catholic when we first got married. I started going to Mass with Carol. I was going to Mass all the time, but I had been confirmed Episcopalian, so I wasn't going to communion. But ultimately, in 1998, I became a full Catholic, and at that time, you know, we decided that we needed to do something to help the church, to build the church, and we wanted to do something that we could do together. And we both had experience as teachers. I'd been a Russian instructor, and she had been a Russian teacher, and so we thought, and our experience with NFP had been very good, so we thought it would be good to share what we had learned with other couples. So it was we started learning, I think, in 1998. I don't remember. I know we first started teaching couples in 1999.
When Jack was a baby.
Yeah.
For me, it was just such a revelation too. And you know how when you first come back to the church, or you discover your faith, and you're like obnoxiously in love with Jesus, and so everybody's just like, okay, I get it, you know. you're a Christian, okay, you love the Blessed Mother, that's awesome. Okay, let's talk about what we're having for dinner. You know what I mean? Like that sort of thing. And I kind of felt like that about NFP. That I was just so encouraged and so amazed at how it worked. And I still see this in my students when they do their first chart and they see that their temperature does go up, and that this isn't some figment that the Pope made up in some secret cabal, you know, with Mary Magdalene, you know, in like some secret dark room in Paris, that this actually does work, that this is scientific. And I was thrilled about that. And I think I was also reared in such a disordered way. Not that my parents were super disordered, but we had issues of infidelity and substance abuse and divorce, and some issues surrounding sexuality and the way I was even catechized, that it was really important to me to try to undo some of that damage. And I think another thing that NFP teaches is the value of every single human being, that even if, sometimes it happens in any marriage, whether you're on contraceptives or you're not on contraceptives, a woman becomes pregnant if she has sexual activity. Life wins out. There's that blade of grass through the concrete. It will happen. And the message that I think you learn through practicing NFP, and that becomes internalized after your physical behavior. Your physical behavior is one thing, and then your spirit follows, because we're like this with our spirits and our bodies, is that even if you're not ready for that baby, God is. And that baby is meant to be here. That baby is meant to be alive, and you're not 100% responsible. So, if you're scared, that's okay. That's not something that needs to be fixed. It doesn't need to be. You don't need to fix what God has put into place.
It was our personal experience a little bit. Not that we I think we were ready when Carol became pregnant with our first daughter. That we had a son and then a daughter. But our first son, in his early years, first couple of years, was extremely high strung, and he had night terrors, and he had a lot of eccentricities. So we lived in an apartment at the time, and he had to push the button,
which is not that unusual,
for the elevator. And if somebody else pushed it, then he would scream and scream and scream.
I'm going to say this on film or whatever, but he used to, when he got out of the bathtub, we had to put a towel around his back, and he used to have to parade through the apartment naked, and we all had to say, "All hail the Marquis of Carabas," from Puss in Boots, and if we didn't do that, he would scream, "You're murdering me, you're killing me." So when I got pregnant with number 2, all of a sudden it struck me, oh my goodness, this is going to be a disaster. I am going to totally screw this up.
And so that's an example. And I, as I said, I think I said I'm a blithe spirit. So despite I could see my wife was suffering, and that disturbed me. I was worried about that.
Thank you.
But
thanks for that.
But finally, when Mary was born, it was. My optimism was borne out in that particular case, because it was just what Max needed. He needed, someone that he could kind of instruct, and that, could
someone
be his,
lower on the totem pole. He resented being lowest. It felt good to him to practice benevolent
so it was
power.
very calming. It was very calming for him. So this is something that we haven't really talked about yet. But one thing that NFP helps you to understand is that often the best thing that you can give for one of your children is a sibling or another sibling. And more important, that ultimately, this won't happen with everyone, but ultimately with Max, he was able to get a full scholarship to go to college. So in his case, saving for college education over having another sibling wasn't the thing that we needed to do most. He needed to have someone who would help him to channel some of his energy.
And someone to love.
And someone to love. Yes.
Yeah.
It is amazing. The things that you're bringing up here are just kind of flashbacks for me personally. I just remember when my wife and I had our first child, and Dr. Bachowski, who delivered our first child, said, the best thing you could do is have, another child, bring a sibling into this world for your first. And it's true. I think for us, it's been more the merrier mentality.
And that's the beauty of Divine Mercy, frankly.
Yeah.
And we were talking about this before, that, when I was pregnant with my 6th, I was 42. And the sonographer, is that what you call it? The sonogram technician, said, "Healthy baby, stop." And when I had the, because I have an epidural that's made me very open to life, epidurals. But I had an epidural, and then the lady who gave me the epidural said, "This makes you think twice about ever trying this again, doesn't it?" Like this attitude, this very flippant attitude. I've had people say to me, how gross it is to be pregnant at my age, or things along those lines. And the beauty of coming here is that it's joy. You walk in, and if your baby is doing fine, it's joy. If your baby has something that needs to be addressed, it's addressed with joy. That, you know, that God is good all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And just what an amazing message that is, and what a supportive atmosphere that we have here that's really different, that's really special. Again, that, you know, and reiterating the fact that, you know, when I came in here at 42 and I was going to have the baby when I was 43, every message is, well, you know, number one, this shows that you have a complete lack of control over yourself.
Yeah.
Of course, you know, we're a couple of old sex fiends. And number two, you know, what are you doing? This baby's going to be sick.
Great, thank you again for joining us. We, Dr. Spector has joined us here. She was visiting with patients, seeing patients, as always what goes on here at Tepeyac, and so we were able to bring her in after she had an appointment to join Carol and Stan and myself. And we were really, before Doctor, we were sharing really the experiences of Carol and Stan as a married couple and as instructors, and what has NFP meant for them from their marital standpoint and in their relationship, and then really how they were inspired to kind of get in to become instructors. So I guess what I'd love to hear from you, Doctor, is how does it first come into your professional, and how were you inspired to kind of take a deeper dive in your career towards NFP and understanding the different fertility bases?
Well, I'm not sure I was inspired, so to speak. I had many years, probably 5 to 10 years, where I felt very like a hypocrite, basically, because I was a Catholic doctor, but from my training and everything, I really didn't know where to go with this, because just as NFP is so involved intricately with every part of my practice now, birth control pills were with the same intricacy involved with my practice as a resident and immediately in my first couple years of practice. So I guess my inspiration honestly was Humanae Vitae. I mean, I knew, I had read the document. It gave such a beautiful vision of married life, and I could understand that, well, if you had some places where contraception was okay, then that whole structure just fell apart. So it was like a big, beautiful wall that was strong and sure. Once you took a brick out, then it all fell apart. So I had many years of trying to read moral theologians, rarely asking priests, although because I didn't do that much because they seemed pretty shy about being, upfront about any of that. So really, my tipping point, if you will, was NFP teachers. So when I was in my early couple years, there was a couple-to-couple lead couple where I was in practice, and we became friends. And after I attended some of their courses, I felt like I knew everything there was to know about NFP. Then I met another NFP teacher, and she taught Creighton model. And she kind of kept at me to go and get trained in Creighton model. And it took a little convincing, but I finally did that. And really that was kind of the end of it for me, because once you have a good alternative, then there's no reason to go back. Plus it gave me, I went up to Omaha then and spent 6 years with the Pope Paul VI Institute, and it really made me firm in the ability to practice OBGYN without using birth control pills, which may sound like a simple thing, but it's really not. I mean, like I said, it's so woven into everything you do. You give people birth control immediately after they're delivered. It's involved even in oncology patients, because sometimes if they're younger, they may have serious reasons not to be pregnant. On and on and on. Any GYN problem. And it's very interesting because the FDA only approves birth control pills for 2 things: contraception and acne, and I guess PMS. There is no FDA approval for it to be used for bleeding problems, for dysmenorrhea, for any of the multitude of things that it's used for, which is very interesting, because if you talk to a resident in training, you will find that their perception is they use it for everything. That's the first thing you use. It's the golden elixir that works for almost everything. So anyway, So that's how I got involved, and once I had gone to the Institute and learned how to apply it to all aspects of OBGYN, then it was pretty easy. But not necessarily easy finding a position, but easy to incorporate and easy to work with patients that way. So
When you, as a physician, introduce these types of NFP type methodologies to a couple that's it's brand new to them, what are some of the objections or their reactions?
It's interesting. I really don't get much pushback, honestly.
Yeah, that's lucky. That's nice.
Because where I am, they're asking for something to help them with a medical problem.
Right.
So infertility, endometriosis, etc. So that's why I don't get a pushback. I'm using it not, I guess, 80 or 90% of the time. Well, maybe not. At least 50% of the time, I'm using it as a methodology to help a treatment.
Right.
In terms of trying to convince people once they've delivered, I'd say at least half of the time they say, oh my gosh, I never knew about that. I'd be happy to try it. Some people are just like, well, I had an IUD before and that's what I want again.
Right.
So there's little discussion. But if someone would say, well, I don't think this is so great. I mean, I bring out all the things about how it makes the couple closer, how the woman really knows her cycle, the husband really knows and is aware of the way his wife's body works, which is really crucial part of it. I was just part of a little conference with medical students and Dr. Duane, who's a family practitioner up at Georgetown, and we also had participating a woman who works with the Georgetown Institute of NFP, and they approach this just from a very secular viewpoint, and they mostly treat very third world, they're mostly out in third world countries trying to teach them very simple methods of NFP. And so the woman comes up and says, well, you have to realize that women don't only have intercourse when they want to. Meaning you have to understand that there's this whole big thing of abuse and domestic abuse, and maybe not even just abuse, but just not being together enough that the woman may feel like she's kind of, put upon. So I just had to raise my hand and say, well, our hope is that with NFP, this is something so different from contraception that either if there was abuse in the picture, it would improve that, or it just wouldn't allow that to ever happen in the first place.
The idea that, you wouldn't tell a woman who's gotten her arm broken, well, just put a cast on it and go back there.
Right.
And
Exactly.
because it'll heal.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Exactly. So they're looking at it almost purely from a sense of woman's power.
Mm-hmm.
And we're looking at it from a sense of this couple really being intimate and loving each other, and such that it couldn't even be possible that the husband would physically abuse the wife or coerce her.
Yeah.
Now, does coercion never happen? That would be silly to think that. But I think with NFP, one of the big selling points is that the relationship is improved, and a lot of those things that we see as negative would be better.
Yeah, they're ameliorated. Yeah.
Tell me, from Carol and Stan, your experience, what are some of the objections over the years that you've heard from couples?
I think a lot of people just are very skeptical that it could work.
Right.
My biggest thing, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'd say that overwhelmingly the thing is that two things. One, they think it is antediluvian, that it's, and that, and you'll find any excuse not to think about it seriously. Well, the church wants this because they just want as many babies as possible because they want as much money as possible. So there's the hostility that comes. And then the other one is fear that if you don't have everything planned, if you don't know exactly when you're going to have your baby, how it's going to be, do I have the right house, will I have my IRA set up? Stan was saying in our class, they don't do this as much anymore, but they used to have this thing where, plan your child's retirement before he's in kindergarten. If I don't know that I'm going to be able to get him into school, I've had friends who haven't started having children until their stock portfolio had hit a certain point where they wanted to. And they feel like they'll be considered idiots. I've had friends who've had abortions, not because they were afraid that people would know they were sleeping with someone, they were living with this person, but because they thought it made them look stupid to be pregnant before they were married, before they had all of their ducks in a row. And so they aborted the baby because that would make them look, what the secular idea of what is immoral now is to be faithful
Responsible.
and responsible, but also to be faithful and to say, you know, or even just we have to always have an out for the consequences of our behavior, you know. And so to say, I'm going to do this and I'm going to be so committed that I'm going to hold nothing back from my partner, and I'm going to trust him, and he's going to trust me, and we're not going to fool each other, and I'm going to give him 100% of trust, which is what it really requires. That's just so foreign to people these days. The idea of having that level of trust even with your partner. When we first got married and I said, you know, I'm going to stay home, his family said to me, his family, who loves him best of all, said to me, you know, shouldn't you be prepared in case something happens?
That is in case I dump her.
Yeah, in case he dumps me. And I said, you know, I'm going to go on the assumption nothing's going to happen, because wouldn't it be such a waste of these years with my children, or of just being happy?
That's my aunt talking about me.
I wasn't going to say that. It was a stranger on the street. Yeah.
No, it is amazing how.
But it's fear.
You're right. Yeah, it's the fear and the control factor. Doctor, from a medical standpoint, you know, what are the numbers telling us on, you know, on effectiveness, right? You know, versus chemical contraception versus, you know, well implemented, well understood, and followed through NFP plan.
If you look at the good studies and the more current studies, they're very, very close. Certainly IUDs and long-acting contraceptives are maybe a skosh, maybe a percentage or two better than NFP, taught well, used well, etc. But not that much. Unfortunately, the current medical media still has data out there that's, you know, 40, 50 years old. And we have a very hard time counteracting that. And even when you look at the current medical texts, they will not admit that there is good data showing it's at least 96 to 99% effective. And it becomes less, that number becomes less important as you see people come in over and over again who are using those contraceptives and still pregnant.
Right.
Despite that.
Yeah.
So, you know, I kind of, again, the perception publicly is that you use contraception, you can't get pregnant.
Yeah.
And I think counterintuitively, maybe that's the wrong word to use. So many of us who use NFP have a bigger family.
Yes.
So people make an assumption
Right.
that the reason you have the bigger family is
NFP
because the
didn't
method
work.
has failed.
Right.
Instead of it being that the reason we have the bigger family is because the method works, because we trust each other.
It's a healthier marriage.
It's a healthier marriage,
yeah.
and we have fun.
Yeah.
That this big family is just really, really fun.
Yeah.
And that's the first thing, you know, as people say, well, you've got, you know, 6
it's
kids,
not-
how effective can
it's
it
not
be?
working.
It only works in people's perceptions if you've limited it to 1 or 2 kids.
Yeah.
And that's just
True.
silly.
We're always fighting that battle, right? That public relations or media battle, that the disinformation that does come out, that it's not effective. These fertility awareness methods and using an NFP effectively, that it's really an uphill battle, and it's wonderful to see both of you come in here, and it's a wonderful example of that.
Oh, thank you.
And Doctor, you come day in and day out, and really instructing in both of you, giving the truth of really the effectiveness of NFP, and really for myself and my family, it's been I echo a lot of what you've shared today. It's something that's really effective for us, and I think the fear that you talked about before, and the unknown and the disinformation, I think people just really have to take a deeper dive into understanding this. And really, I encourage all of you who are listening video today and watching to really take a deeper dive into these articles that we've shared every Friday, and to do some more exploration on your own. There's couple league. There's information out there that if you are looking to get engaged and want to take an NFP class, Tepeyac OBGYN has entered an agreement with an NFP instructor, so we will be having classes here You're currently, are you still associated with Couple to Couple League? Or?
We are, but I would also like to add that we love when couples come to us
Yeah.
that are 41 and they say,
Mhm.
I've been on the pill for 11
Right.
years, I want to get off. Or, it doesn't have to just be newlyweds. There is nothing wrong with saying
Yeah.
this isn't working for us and we want to try something new at any stage.
Yeah.
We love to get our hands on the newbies, but we really are love, and it's so encouraging to us to see couples that have been married for 13, 14 years,
Yeah.
maybe longer. And we've had couples that are like at the very end of their fertile time.
Mhm.
And they just say, you know what, I've just realized I've really goofed up, or, this just has not worked for us. What a blessing. So at any time, and, anybody who just wants to know about how their body works, we would love to have them. Priests, are wonderful to have come in, and I could not do anywhere near the job you do, but I've had talks with several doctors about, just because they need to see that we actually do know what we're talking about.
Right.
Well, it's just part of her story. You just said that was one of the big things that
Yeah.
kind of got you
Oh,
rolling
that's
in the
true.
right direction.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
but just want to thank both of you,
Thank
Carol and Stan, for coming in, and Dr. Spector, and really thank you for all who are watching. Please like, subscribe, and share, and keep in tune to the articles that we do share. Thank you.